Okay, welcome once again. We are going to talk in this meeting of ours, or virtual meeting of ours, the topic research process. So, based on what you can see on the screen, you have there how the research process is actually being discussed or being defined. So, research process is the systematic investigation into and study materials and sources in order to establish facts and reach new conclusion. So, your main objective in the research process is actually to come out with a new conclusion. So, as we have made mention, a research is a systematic. So, in arriving into your conclusion, you should have undergone a systematic investigation. Now, what are your subject in the systematic investigation? Actually, the materials that you're going to use for the subject of the study, and also likewise, where are the sources of your information? Don't in research, don't just simply believe in all the sources that you are going to encounter. Be critical also as to the validity of the sources of materials that you will be gathering. So, a research process is further explained as a process of systematic inquiry that entails collection of data. So, then therefore, from here, you should be skilled enough to know how to collect information or data. So, in here, you need a lot of common sense and sensitivity in order to be critical with the information. Yes, you should be choosy on the information that you will be getting. Like, for example, you are going to a house and then you are going to ask for the common animals present. And when you are going to ask if there is a dog, and if they say that they don't have a dog, but you have seen a dog, then think twice what is the valid information. And then your statistics will guide you in the analysis and interpretation of data or information. So, based on your subject statistics, you will be able to get some knowledge on the suitable methodologies or statistical treatment to be used in the your discipline of studies. Perception have different methodologies or statistical treatment. Regression analysis could also be done. But however, if you are into action research, statistical treatment is simpler as compared to complex social researches. Okay, this is actually the schematic diagram. This is the most complicated but actually the most clear uh, illustration as to how the research process was actually or will be conducted by you. So you have here six colors, so six chapters that you are going to consider. So the first thing to do is actually identify what is your concept. So if you are the only one performing the experiment, you have to brainstorm with your advisors, your critic, or even your mentors in defining or coming into a limit as to what topic you are going to discuss. So maybe information like what is your interest of study will come out. So starting from now, you ask the question, what is your most favorite topic in science? Or maybe what interests you most as a strategy of thinking. So from here, you can have your own brainstorming also. What can I not do, or what can I do, or who are the people that could help me if I want this. So you try to initiate what do you need to find out. It is not because that you are fan of the color blue, you will get your subject that is colored blue. But if you have chosen the sea as your subject, but you do not know how to swim, so you cannot get information under the sea. So you find out who you are and what you can do in order to initiate what study or what concept that you're going to discuss. And then refine searches technique. So if you think you love to work on with water, but you are afraid of going down the river or going down a canal, or you have fear of going into or diving into, you have to redefine your search methodology. So your search technique is in question if you do not have the sufficient skill. Do not work about the jungle if you are afraid of snakes, because for sure you will be exposed to uh, animals like snakes and even more dangerous animals. So locate or try to identify if you could really get the information that is needed in your study. So can you get the information in a certain school? So if you can get it from a certain school, can you not get that from your school when you have your grade 12 or maybe when you have your grade 6? But since you are B-study students, of course your target schools are the secondary schools or per grade 12 is offered or even per college is offered. So from there, you know already what you want to study, you know where you want to know and gather the information. Now, select what information is relevant or reliable to your field of study. Do you need to make some action research? Do you need to have some experiment? Or do you need to explore further a certain existing information? So you try to evaluate now um, possible sources of information. And then when you have taken all this information, you try to organize all these kinds of information. So you need your notes, you need your ability to recall what you have gathered as informal information, or maybe you were so ashamed to take note of the things that the principal that you have interviewed have told you. So you organize yourself. Try to summarize, try to paraphrase if needed, the information that you have taken. If you are working with qualitative research, there is a need of paraphrasing in order to get the code of information. So you categorize. Is the information that you have taken for your general problem, or are these to answer your specific problems? Now, once you have taken your information, the next thing to feel is you have to make some parallelism whether the result of your research or the information that you have gathered object or confirm a certain existing information. So you need a lot of books or references or literature. This is now where the art of getting all, not all, former researches information from former researches to confirm what you have taken as information or information that contradicts or you might be feeling that it is negating. But always remember that a finding is a finding. There is no there is no wrong findings because that's what you have taken. You cannot correct what is uncontrolled. And then once you have taken all this parallelism between uh, your references or related literature, then you have to assess what really is the information that you want to share to the society. So you try to reflect. Will you gonna say that since the score of the students increase after giving a certain strategy, or maybe you do not recommend such because your study made use of so expensive technology. So this is now realigning what you could share to your society based from the research that you have undertaken. So this is a more intensive illustration. So to summarize what we have discussed in the discussion, the first part is actually exploration. So you are exploring what you can and out of your resources, what you can do. From there, identifying your resources or identifying your inputs, then you identify what is the process that you are going to do in order to come out with your research. So that your final output is actually your research report. So as a researcher, always be guided that you should always have your input, you should always have your process, and from those two things, you should have your immediate output. Okay, so these two blocks here could refer to the process that you will undertake when you conduct research. This is a more comprehensive discussion as to the different research process. So if you're going to look at what is unique in this illustration is there is a repeat. So that this makes actually the process repeating again. So repeating the process could mean not repeating 100%, but maybe you will going to your modify your procedure, replicate the place of your study, or you get another group of respondents. So this is the step-by-step research process. So what is unique also in this thing is after the evaluation process, you have to write, not only write, but disseminate your data or information to the end users. So if your research is for the improvement of fishermen, then be sure that you have informed a group of fishermen about your research. If your research is about teaching, then be sure that you have reached also, you will be able to reach also and give and share your research to those group of people. Okay, let's discuss more about the different sources of information. Sources of information could be divided into two groups. You have the primary sources and the secondary sources. Well, the difference is just so easy. If you say primary, that is direct contact. Secondary, there is a bridge in between. So if you are talking to your respondent face to face, but it is not allowed these days, you are actually getting primary information. If you use a checklist and allow your respondents to answer this, you are actually obtaining a primary data. So your respondents' nearness or proximity to you determine whether they are primary sources or secondary sources. So if we say secondary sources, they could mean the data that you could get from the book. So the book is your secondary source. Or maybe the broadcast from a television. If you analyze, it seems like a primary source, but The newscaster is just simply a secondary source of information. These are good references as a basis for a primary sources. It validates or it negates what is being told or acquired in the primary sources. Getting both primary and secondary sources is advisable, especially if you're doing some triangulation to test the validity of your data. So these are actually modern day sources of information. So your experiences is a primary source of information. The print media and electronic sources are secondary source of information. But these are typically how we get information nowadays. So your information plus electronic sources plus print media are the things that are usually seen in thesis or even in dissertation as sources of information. So for direct primary information, the usual thing being used today is a result of interview or survey. Observation experimentation is also getting the data directly from what is observed. So observation experimentation in science is obtaining primary source of information. But if you're going to make use of the mass information given by the books or journals available in the library, you are talking about secondary information. So, if you want to get some information about growing girls or growing boys like you, or adolescent girls or boys, and you are just simply getting information from books and journals, your source of data is uh, secondary data. There are researchers nowadays that actually depend solely on journals as source of information, not necessarily going to the primary source of information. So that is your research cycle. Now you have also research life or how you are going to keep your data alive or meaning relevant. It might be archived today, or it might not be a relevant information today, or it might not be a popular data today, but by the future, who knows, it could be used as a reference to validate new information. Remember the coronavirus. There are so many studies about the coronavirus, but since information on coronavirus were kept and the influenza virus, the recall your microbiology. There are so many coronavirus that you have encountered, and the information on this were actually taken in order to study the COVID virus 19, COVID virus, the COVID 19, the COVID 19. So banking your data is very important. So if you create data, you should know how to process data and then analyze the data. When you will have your or when you have finished your thesis, you should know how to preserve the data. And if you go to a higher level of research, you could go publish your data to different journals or even present into conventions so that people have the opportunity to reuse the data that you have produced in your thesis or in your dissertation by the future. Because remember, uh, it is plain tasking in your part to produce this data. But if you just simply make those books or this is books be stored inside the cabinet without being reproduce or reuse the information that you have generated will just be useless. Research resources are found in various ways, both within and outside the library. So you could get information from us, your mentors. You can get also other people's point of view who are not necessarily within the world of academe. You could get information and education from the broadcast media, and of course, not to forget your www. In a split of a seconds, it generates thousands of information. So, if in our times we're so hard up in getting related literature, in your part it is of no problem because your technology will aid you in generating these informations. So you must exercise your critical thinking skills, however, in order to distinguish credible from not so credible information. So you should know what is false news, what is fake news, what is real news, what is a real news. There are different apps uh, that is available in the internet market to organize your information. And its browser has their own way of keeping information. So the Apple's Note, if you are using your iPhone, the Apple's Note app might work for you. The Office 365 of the Microsoft or the what do you call this? Yeah, the word Microsoft 365 or the Microsoft offers OneNote. So you could from this app you could store your information or your data in the web, directly in the web, but no one could get that except you. As if you have you have put into the bank the information that you have generated. So, so with the Google has its own Google Keep, and if you are using the Google Classroom, there are so many apps related to it in order to store for the meantime information that is used in teaching that you could use in the experiment, controlled experiment in teaching. There are several apps still that could organize your information, not only that you could generate information, you could have the Dropbox, the Google Drive. The Google Drive could be found in your Google Class, the iCloud, and also likewise the Microsoft OneDrive. Um, the only problem with this kind of setup in storing your data is it is internet dependent. So if you do not have any other means of uh, storing your data except within the internet and you are still living in the Philippines, you might encounter some brownout or low signal, and in those cases, you will be hard up in uploading or retrieving your data. But the beauty of it is you do not bring or anything or any what do you call that when you were young? The floppy disk. Once you lose your floppy disk, just like your sorry, your thumb drive, if you're going to lose it, or if you happen to lose it, uh, that's a big headache. But if you have stored it in the internet, as long as there is signal, you can retrieve your data. You have not even lost one comma or one sentence. So it is important for you to process your data. So as your assignment, You have to read this. The 10 free apps and tools for starting out and staying organized. This is published by Monica Burns. It was updated just recently, August 1, 2017. So I think this is all for this meeting. Next meeting we will discuss, yes, how research is used. So thank you once again. Um, we will meet again in our scheduled meeting. Okay, goodbye.